Welcome back to the Round One Popular Opinions. Happy winter, although it is not officially winter. I feel like I track actual solstice dates the least when it's winter because I just want winter to be here for as long as possible. So December 1st onwards is winter in my mind, and that is how we're going to treat it today. So I'm going to start this season off with some winter recommendations. The problem with all these kinds of videos is that very few books actually fit into neat little boxes such as seasons or aesthetics. So a lot of the recommendations are very similar, but I've collected a wide range of familiar recommendations. So maybe, hopefully, they're sort of in one spot. But yes, winter is my favorite season. As you can see, I've decked myself out with like blue rings, with a winter mug, with blue bedding, even though my mushrooms stay in place. But I'm drinking sage tea and celebrating the beginning of my favorite season that I really, really always mourn when it's over. So let's get into it. Let's talk about books. And a lot of them will be like actually winter themed. It's taking place during the winter. It's going to make you feel cold while you read it if you can imagine atmospheres, which I know some people can't. But some of them will also just be things that you feel like reading in the winter. Nothing Christmassy, nothing holiday themed because I'm just not that type of reader or person really. So there won't be like Christmas books here. I don't really care. I don't really care about holidays. I don't think there's any holidays that I celebrate. I do like the aesthetic of Halloween, but that's also not a holiday I celebrate. So I'm just not a holiday person. Let's get into it. The first book that I would like to recommend to you is a personal childhood favorite of mine, and it is How to Train Your Dragon, the entire series. I don't think the entire series takes place during winter, but as is said famously in the film, Berk, the island, is like very cold and wintry and windy. It like rains whatever days out of the year and snows whatever days out of the year. I don't remember the exact quote, but obviously, since it's a Viking story and it takes place on a very remote island off the coast of Scotland, I think that's how Cressida Cowell made it up. It is obviously going to be a wintry vibe with an island where it's always cold and they wear warm clothing and have dragons as companions. It's a bit of a chaotic series. I didn't remember actually how chaotic the series actually was until I reread them as an adult, but I loved them as a child. So if you are a child, if you have a child, or if you just feel like reading a children's book, I think this is a great series to dive into during the winter because you're just going to feel like you're at a windy island in fictional Viking Scotland where they have to wrangle some really, really chaotic and really, really impetuous dragons. So keep in mind that they're very different from the films. Like both I and Cressida and everyone who loves the books also loves the films, but the books are really not like the films. Like Toothless in particular is completely different in the books. Although I loved Toothless when I was a child, and I do remember that. The other thing that's important to note is that you can get an audiobook narrated by David Tennant. That's my preferred reading style of choice. I play the audiobook while reading the book or just the audiobook because like I love David Tennant. He's just a delight to listen to and he puts his all into this. So you can do the audiobook if you like. And also a particular recommendation is watch the second How to Train Your Dragon film if you're reading this because it's just one of the most beautiful films ever made in terms of content and visually. Like, it is just stunning. And there's a lot of ice, snow powers. It's very wintry as far as themes are concerned. So that is my first recommendation. And like my childhood self loves it and my adult self loves it. So I think it's very apt. The next recommendation, perhaps a little annoyingly, is the Winter Night Trilogy by Catherine Arden. I say annoyingly because this year I made a vlog whining about the last book in the trilogy. But all that aside, Bear and the Nightingale is still like one of my favorite books of all time. Like it will, I think, always be one of my favorite books of all time. It's just that dear to me from the aesthetic, from the themes, from the way it's written, from the character work that she does in that book, from the relationships. That book is just like a masterpiece in my book, and it is perfectly wintry. I know recently there's been a lot of people either reading it for the first time or not liking it, which is interesting. I always find it interesting when stuff I was obsessed with as a teenager has a resurgence now in the TikTok era, so it's kind of hilarious. But and I'm not just TikTok, I mean other YouTubers also discovered that trilogy for some reason in 2025. But better late than never. But the first book, love of my life. Okay, the entire thing is wintry because it's set in like old time Russia. However, I think book two actually takes place during the summer, and we come back to winter in the third book, obviously called Winter of the Witch. So we come back to winter in the third book, and some of my favorite parts of book three do take place in winter, but I'm particularly recommending the first book, The Bear and the Nightingale, because it's still one of my favorite books of all time, even though the trilogy is no longer my favorite trilogy of all time. But I love everything about it. Everything about that first book, like I am literally obsessed with to this day, and I might reread it again. I might reread it again. It's been a while since I reread the first book, so I have vlogs for all three books in the trilogy if you want to see them. They're just very far apart. I think like years apart between the first and third book, so that could be fun for you to explore. But I do have like long, in-depth videos for all three books if you're interested in that. But it is a winter staple for a reason. Next up, I will not drone on about Heather Fawcett any more than I already have to, because this entire year I feel like I've talked about Heather Fawcett in almost every praiseworthy video, but it has to be done, okay? School Between Winter and Fairyland, which I recently got. It got to me from the UK, and it's missing a page, like an entire page is torn out, which is devastating. But why did you not return it? Why did you not complain or ask for a refund? Because they would ask that I return it, and I wasn't going to return it. Like, I barely got my hands on that book, okay? Barely. Like, I found one singular copy in the UK for like £30. I got a discount because of my gift card, but I was not going to return that book. But it is in the title, The School Between Winter and Fairyland. It is everything and anything that I could possibly want. And I am so happy that I read it again, because I felt like I need to confirm it. Like, my second read is always to confirm whether a book is my favorite or not. And now that I have my hands on it and it's so beautiful and delightful, I can confirm. I can confirm that that is my favorite Heather Fawcett, and I just want to encourage so many people to read it, because I feel like it's one of those books that I've not heard anyone ever talk about of all the books that she has put out. So please read it. Like, it's just so good from start to finish, thematically, character-wise, relationship-wise. It's so bittersweet, while also being really heartwarming. Like, the descriptions, I just can't. I cannot stop gushing or thinking about that book, so please read it. The next very obvious recommendation is going to be Ember and the Ice Dragons. It's in the title. Okay, it's in the title. It takes place in one of the poles. I'm not sure. I think it could be the South Pole. And it's about ice dragons, a species that is being hunted for poaching. And yes, just like the last one, apparently my favorite Heather Fawcett's are always a little bit bittersweet. But this one, especially, I think, has the most, like, I don't want to say bleak ending, because like it is still middle grade, but this one left me the most empty feeling in the ending, where I was like, I do kind of need another book. But all that to say that it's a great book. It's a great look at dragons. It's a great look at something like poaching in a fantastical setting. And it's such a beautifully written book. Like, everything about Heather Fawcett's writing just comes out when she writes about winter in any kind of way. So I would highly recommend this one. And I'm not saying anything more about the two of them, because I feel like I've harped on enough about the excellence of her middle grades. The next one is also a bit of an obvious one, and that is Ice Palace. I'm not saying the authors if I can't pronounce the name, but the Ice Palace. I read this May, when like the last bouts of cold swept across the land where I live. And I remember I was freezing cold under like a thick blanket and like a hoodie, and just freezing. and I read The Ice Palace, and my god, did that atmosphere like fit with what I was feeling. I felt like I was even colder while I was reading it. And if you're not that type of reader, where you like feel the stuff that you're reading, where you can imagine it, like I am a, what is it called? Like I did the research recently, aphantasia. I have like full aphantasia where I can imagine realistically like senses, sounds, tastes, images as if they're there. So I certainly felt colder while reading this, especially the titular chapter, The Ice Palace, when like the ice structure is being described, but the entire thing is just obviously like winter personified almost in a novel. And it's very short, so like you can read it probably in like one sitting. That's how I did it. Next one that I will be recommending is Robert Frost. Like I put this book here, beautiful blue and white colors. I put the book there because I just like looking at it, and I pull it out every winter, even if I'm not going to necessarily like read anything new. Like I've read essentially all of the shorter poems. I don't really like longer poems, so I didn't really read them yet, but it's a wonderful collection, so I would recommend that edition specifically. And Robert Frost in general. Like, it's in the name, genuinely. How can you be a poet who writes about winter and about nature and not call yourself something like Frost? So I highly recommend his poetry in general. I think he is like my top two poet. I'm not sure who would be number one, like Robert Frost or Walt Whitman, but I like their poetry for different times of year, different vibes, I suppose. So for this one, I highly recommend specifically Robert Frost's poetry. The next one is a little unusual. I've put down the T because I'm done with it. I'm always so upset when I'm done with it because I love it. The book is Villette by Charlotte Bronte. I am recommending this one specifically for winter. Not necessarily because like the entirety of it takes place during the winter or it has like a very snowy vibe. It's because it has that like oppressive, depressive feeling from the main character, Lucy Snow, which that does tie into it a little bit. But it feels like winter, even though it's not necessarily always winter in the book. Because, and I don't care if this is a spoiler or not, that's like what happens throughout the entire book. The majority of the melancholy and the depression comes from this woman pining after a man who she can't really have. And like, there's a whole thing there. But when she's like alone, when she's cold, when the winter's out and like she doesn't have any pupils to instruct because she's a teacher in Belgium. So like when she's alone, when she's lonely, when she's thinking about him, but she's miserable about it, like it just has that winter feeling without it necessarily evoking like snow and ice. So I would recommend that specifically of all of Charlotte's books for winter, because the others feel more like late autumn novels, whereas this one, like going through Lucy Snow's like ruminations and her thoughts and her absolute misery thinking about this man just gave winter. And I'm going to have to reread that during the winter, definitely. Like, even though I gave it 2 stars, I want to reread it in the winter next time so I can just get that feeling at its proper time of year. The next book that I haven't read, and there will be some books that I haven't read, but I know confidently that they are good for the season, even though if I personally can't tell you if they're any good. Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco. My mother's favorite book, or like one of her favorite books. It definitely was her favorite book at some point in her life. That's what I'm getting at. That I keep saying I will read, and I will read in the new year. But I watched the film and the series with her, and it takes place during the winter. Like, it's a mystery. It's an 1,000 years ago set mystery in the winter. It's got the gothic, but it also has the snow and the cold and the reclusive monks who are solving this mystery in secret libraries, and that cold feeling, and obviously the impression of the Inquisition. There's nothing more depressing than that if we're looking at the experience of women, at least. Either way, I definitely know that it's set in winter and that it does have the vibe. And if you're into like a longer, a bit more dense info dumpy book, because I know it is that without having read it, go wild with this. It's definitely great to read in the winter, and I will do so myself in a month. Another one that I haven't read is Dr. Zhivago by Pasternak. So I bought this like recently because I wanted to read it in winter. I did not want to read it because I know there's like a lot of history, and I think it takes place during a war or even several wars. So I was like, I'm not interested in it. And it's a love story, which I'm just not. I'm not the target audience for the love story being like such a main driving force of a novel. But my mother again convinced me. She convinced me it takes place in winter. I I don't know if it's actually in Siberia in Russia, but it's definitely Russian winter. So whether I like it or not is yet to be seen, but she definitely sold it to me by convincing me that I should read it in winter. So I will do so, and I don't know if it's any good or not, but I'm just like giving you the idea because that's how it was pitched to me. Now onto some books again that I have read. Actually, The Crow Girl. I read this also in February. It took me like 2 weeks to read it because it's not a subject matter that's easy to digest by any stretch of the imagination. So it took me two weeks to properly read it, like a little bit at a time. I wish I hadn't read this as an ebook because I feel like I would have retained a bit more of the detail, but I didn't feel like waiting for the physical book. So ebook it was. It takes place in, I want to say Sweden, but now that I'm thinking about it, it could be Norway. I think it's Sweden. Scandinavian countries in any case. So there is a lot of winter. I distinctly remember like this one scene where a specific character is like running through the snow and stuff, and there's the vibe is there, and it's definitely like noir. Scandinavian noir is like famous for a reason, and I feel like if you want to give yourself a long treat this winter, something that's really dark and really bleak, but I will assure you does end up being hopeful, and you feel a sense of justice when certain things take place. I would highly recommend it for this season. However, again, keep in mind that the entire subject matter of this book is sexual assault and pedophilia. So that's not really pitching it for you, is it? But like, it's a thriller. It's, or not really a thriller, but it's Scandinavian noir. So if you know what that means, I would highly recommend it. I have one more middle grade, and that is Iron Hand by Charlie Fletcher. I just shocked myself by how much I loved the last two books in this trilogy. Also, a childhood favorite of mine that I spent like a decade searching for because I couldn't remember what it was called. I just knew what the cover looked like. So when I finally found it, I got my hands on all three books and I read them. This one specifically has a really wintry atmosphere because something occurs in the plot that makes like the world grind to a halt and turn into like a snowy, not really wonderland because it's actually quite bleak, but a snowy land. And there's like iced over rivers and snow falling on top of the statues, and the entire town is dusted with it while they're rushing to do what needs to be done. And I think there's like a wintry cold atmosphere throughout the trilogy because it actually takes place over like a very short span of time. But this one in particular, I remember like two very snowy, wintry scenes that just, again, gave me that cold feeling that I really liked and appreciated. So I would highly recommend the entire trilogy. But in particular, Iron Hand, I think, kind of went hard on the atmosphere of like the cold streets of London. One more that I haven't read that I completely forgot about, so I did mention it earlier, Ice by Anna Kavan. I do have it, and it's not too long of a book, so I want to read it this winter. As soon as I knew it was like a metaphor for her drug use, I was not that interested in it because that's not something that I'm interested in like at all, actually, about reading about or in general. But I could take the metaphor perhaps if the descriptions are nice. And I mean, it's called Ice. So I'm hoping for some kind of atmosphere that's at least a little bit winter like. Do like confirm or deny about that if you've read I Spy on a Command, so I can cross it off my list if it's not at all that and it just tackles the comparison with her drug use. But either way, I do have it. So I'm bringing back one of my favorites, one of my favorites of all time, and I rarely read thrillers, but my favorite is The Killing Place by Tess Gerritsen. My parents also love her. I think they have all of her books. They don't love all of her books, but they do have all of her books. So I read a few, and I didn't really like any except this one because of the setting. And because the main character in this is the character of the two main characters that I vastly prefer. So her relationship to the case that we're tackling in the book, the setting, the who's to blame, like the culprits, so interesting. There's like a boy that's hiding with his like enormous dog in a snowy snowy countryside. I loved everything about this book. Like again, the atmosphere was there. I felt the depression. I felt the isolation of being alone in the cold, of running from someone and having nowhere to go, the scarcity of everything in a setting this cold and wintry, and it's just highly recommend. I wanted to put like the two thriller crime books together because I don't read a lot of them because I prefer to watch my crime mystery stuff, but of the stuff that I've read, it's no surprise that the wintry ones are the ones that actually stuck in my head. The last book that I have to recommend is Murder on the Orient Express, which is another mystery, but like it's on the lighter side. It's Agatha Christie. And specifically, if you can get your hands on it, the graphic novel, I will actually include like a clip of flipping through it so you can see what the art looks like. But it's just a winter staple for me. Like, I have this weird fantasy ever since I was a child, and I like watched a local film about getting snowed in on a train. And Murder on the Orient Express is my favorite Agatha Christie. Something about getting snowed in is like my favorite form of storytelling because yes, it is forced proximity, so it depends on the genre and what you want to do with it. Because in mystery, it means that like the killer is with us and they can't escape, so like we're going to have to solve it right here and now, and we're all in danger because no one can get to us either. So like it's a locked room cabin mystery setup. That's why you really like remote cabin in the woods type of mystery, and this is like snowed in on a train, stuck. We have to solve the mystery. I love that trope. I love that trope in general. Again, like snowed in. We're locked in, we're forced to be together and tackle our problems and talk it out or solve whatever needs solving because we're not going anywhere. It is a form of forced proximity, so it depends on which genre you apply it to. But Orient Express, one of my favorites. I have the book and I have the graphic novel. I like both, but I am specifically highlighting the graphic novel if you need like a lighter mystery to sit tight with. I do actually love the graphic novel. I got it for my birthday this year. It's quite nice. I like the art style, and it definitely gives you the entire story, and you have that like train vibe. I just love trains so much, and I haven't been on one in I think since childhood, so I yearn for the train. I yearn for the train, so that's my last recommendation for you. That is it for the recommendations. I wish there was more. I honestly wish there was more, and some of these I haven't even read. It is very difficult to give thematically relevant recommendations because, again, as I've said in the beginning, books don't fit into neat boxes like that because a lot of the time they don't just take place during one time of the year, one weather season. Like it just doesn't work like that. So this is a bit of a difficult thing to do. And I know people usually like recommend books to be read during winter that have nothing to do with winter but feel wintry. I try to do that with some of my recommendations, but I think unless the book is very seasonally relevant, I don't really have a rule for when I'm going to read a certain book. Like, I don't have one of those, I'm going to read long books during the winter, because again, I read Les Mis during the summer. So I really don't have rules as far as that's concerned. I just read whatever I want to read, whenever I feel like reading it. And I've even started breaking the rules about reading books in the seasons that they're set in. Like, for example, I read almost the entirety of Ray Bradbury in the spring, which he's not a spring kind of author. He really likes autumn, because I'm sick and tired of I have to wait until next year's autumn to be able to read this book that I really want to read. I'm going to read the book when I want to read the book. Okay, so it's difficult to constrain myself to this set of rules, I suppose, for recommendations. So I did my best, and I hope that you enjoyed it, that you liked it, that it was, if not new, because none of these books are new, at least inspired you to look for something wintry and cold and frosty in your reading this year. And I know everyone's doing holiday videos right now, but again, since I'm not that type, I'm just not going to. I will see you in the next video.